Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and school shootings seem to be on the rise if you look at the media, and there's a lot of fear out there, and so this is the topic of discussion today, and to help me do that, I welcome Rob Carter of Zero Eyes, but also Navy SEAL and University of Iowa graduate. Rob, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate you having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
And thanks for doing the intro twice, by the way. I forgot to hit record the first time, everybody. But if you want to see that, I'll go ahead and post the funny video to the website. But anyway, obviously a very heavy topic, so I appreciate you coming in here to discuss this with me. Want to talk about your experience, but also if technology can maybe help us solve this problem. But I think it would be helpful to start with, what is the actual problem? Do Iowa schools have a gun violence problem? Is it really on the rise nationally? I want to start there with the Iowa perspective, and of course your perspective as a SEAL.
Sure. Yeah. So gun violence in public places, to include, K through 12 and higher education has been on the rise. This is something that we've seen since pretty much the 1960s, with it really being highlighted after Columbine in 1999. So it's been 25 years, and it has been on the rise. There's been a significant spike since kind of return to class after COVID. So since 2020, there's kind of been a jump in gun-related incidents on school campuses.
Spike after COVID?
Yes.
Wow.
So the data kind of shows that before COVID, there was, it was on the rise. After COVID, it's kind of skyrocketed up and to the right.
I mean, obviously, we're not talking about core issues here. That's not your expertise. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's definitely not my expertise. Is there some kind of trigger point? Is there something that pushed it there? I don't know if anybody knows that.
I think it's hard to say.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not an expert in, behavior or mental health by any means. But, from what I do see and what we've seen since Columbine is, there are these events that happen day in, day out, frankly, where there's a gun on campus.
Yeah.
But then there's the school shootings that make national, local news and repeating the cycle over and over and over. And those events, after the event, kind of what happens is, there's the news, everybody's, thoughts and prayers, and we're taking our time to, remember and give thanks to, the heroes of the story and the first responders. But then time passes and not much actually changes in between these events.
Right. It's true.
So, from my side and Zero Eyes and some of the other layers of security out there, it's what can we do now to put in place to help schools be prepared proactively and in the response of responding to, an active shooter on your campus.
And political strokes on both sides get really frustrated with this. We usually hear Democrats saying, that we should just regulate guns more. And then we'll hear people on the right saying we should regulate them less and allow teachers and administrators to have more guns. So there's a debate on both sides. But from a tactical perspective, because this is one area you're an expert, you're a SEAL trainer too. You train SEAL teams. And so is there a tactical problem posed by schools? Is this why they're a target? Like when you look at this from an expert view, are there things you're like, if only we would be doing these things, this would not be as big of a problem? Is there a tactical reason this is happening?
There's challenges with the response. So in the event of an active shooter on a school campus, there's going to be, and this has been the case in any and all of these examples, hundreds of 911 phone calls. And frankly, most of them are inaccurate. There's about 90% of them are inaccurate, where, they're saying, it's a boy, it's a girl, he's got a blue shirt, a red shirt, he's carrying an assault rifle or a pistol or a shotgun. And that's the information being passed to the dispatchers, and they have to go through the problem of what information is accurate, what information is inaccurate, because they're trying to dispatch police to respond. The police are responding to a building that hopefully they've trained in, maybe, and that's kind of going to be case by case dependent on whether they've done some active shooter training or been in that building before. But they're responding, and what happens traditionally is they respond to the front door.
Oh, okay.
They respond to the front door, and then they have to, unless there's some sort of stimulus to pull them into a direction of the building, they're entering through the front door, and they start to clear the first room they come across, and then the second room they come across, and so on, until they work their way towards either a stimulus, like I said, or the shooter. And that's a big challenge because these buildings are massive, hundreds of, even thousands of square feet.
You said something that was really interesting there. You mentioned, and I only know this from just probably movies. That's everything I know about the SEALs is from a couple friends who are former special forces and movies. So, and the friends that are in special forces are very careful what they tell me, and movies are probably very, very inaccurate, right? So, but what I think I understand, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that before you guys go into a building or do any kind of mission, you train with models generally, right? You try to at least do a mock-up or create something that is close to that as possible before you go into any kind of structure, right?
Yes, if we have the intelligence, in my former line of work, we would build something. It's most definitely not life size, but we do a lot of sand tables where you can draw things out on sand and discuss entry points and things like that, or even kind of out in a parking lot or in some dirt, draw some stuff out and move people in the right direction, prior to. Right.
And so knowing the lay of the land in a school building is important. But this comes back to, just to put a period on this, it comes back to communication. Because that's what I'm hearing you say, is that the biggest challenge here is response. Swift and quick response in a school shooting situation is very, very valuable. But local law enforcement, whoever that may be, really are in a position where they can't do that because the information they're receiving is typically, would you say over 90% of the time, is inaccurate? Pretty terrible?
Yeah, it's pretty inaccurate, and it's not uncommon even for folks that do see the shooter to pass inaccurate information. One, we're talking a lot of times about kids calling 911.
Sure. Yeah,
who have never been in a situation like this, and I pray never are again.
Right.
But there's this thing called the fog of war, and I hate to even have to use that in terms of talking about K through 12 schools.
Right.
But it's a real thing where what you see is not actually what was happening.
Sure.
Sometimes that's the case as well, where they're passing information that they believe is accurate, but they passed, they're in this wing of the building, but they're not. They're in this other wing, and that causes confusion. And when there's confusion, they got to respond to the front door and try to figure it out from there.
Right, because when people are in panic, they don't respond logically. And even on a tiny, 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 tiny sliver of this, like when I'm playing sports or something, and I'm having to address very fast things on. There are some times I'm like, whoa! Like if someone gets the best of me, I'm just like, what just happened? I can't even run that through my brain. Sure. It was all too fast. And so if that was a panic situation, I imagine it would be impossible to communicate what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand because I've never been in that situation. But on some level, I can understand why if I was in a panic situation, would be pretty awful communicator with the people that I need to communicate to. In your opinion, do you even think police departments are prepared for this kind of stuff? Because we've seen the Uvalde, we've seen the Parkland videos, and we see officers, and I don't want to bash on officers. I think in Des Moines, in Iowa in general, we hit the officer jackpot here.
Absolutely.
But generally throughout the country, are officers not prepared for this stuff? We see a few examples of them huddling outside of buildings, and I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Counter that to Nashville, the Nashville shooting, where those officers did not wait. They just went right in, addressed the threat, and probably saved, I don't know, who knows how many lives. So is training a big challenge here, or is it something else?
I would say training is always going to be a challenge. You have to find time to get in the school buildings to do the training.
Right, yeah.
But like you mentioned, the shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville, for anyone that has watched that video, hard to watch, but
very hard to watch. Yeah.
But you can kind of see what I was explaining there, where the police officers do respond to that front door.
Yep,
they enter and then they start clearing each room as they come across, and then they hear some gunshots and they realize it's on the second floor.
Right.
They run as fast as they can to the second floor and try to put an end to the violence there.
Right. But they had to wait for those shots in order to know where to go. And this is the challenge. I guess I should come back though. Do we need to train officers differently? Are we good there? Or is it just one of those things that you're like, look, dude, even if my SEAL team was there, we'd be doing the same thing. I mean, obviously SEALs are kind of on a different level. They go through a lot of training, but to a point, are you like, hey, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to clear room by room. We're going to do it differently. But yeah, we're going to clear room by room. If we hear gunshots, we're going to go to the shots. It's going to be the similar strategy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would almost say it's not even fair. My time in the SEAL teams, we get, some of the best training in the world. Yeah. And we get to train more than probably any other force out there as far as our time training versus deploying. And being a police officer or being in law enforcement is extremely difficult because you are working when you're working. You're out on the road, you're out, you're potentially monitoring the school. So there has to be dedicated training times to be able to do that. And then, in the school environment as well, you're looking for days that kids aren't in school. Yeah. So morning training is always better.
Yeah. And I want to talk about this. Don't worry. I do want to talk about the solution you guys are working on here. But what did you have any thoughts on, like, some schools are pulling officers or what they call SROs out of school buildings? Obviously, not having an officer there to immediately address a threat is one thing. But when you're pulling an officer out of a building, does that actually hurt the communication aspect that you were referring to earlier? Is it actually kind of a compounding problem because A, there's no one there to immediately address the threat, but also B, there's no one there that's trained how to communicate, make entry at this door, here's who we're looking for, here's the situation. Does that make things even worse?
I don't want to give a one size fits all for everybody, but I will say that I truly believe in kind of a multi-layered security solution, and SROs, being a part of that. SROs can kind of act as a deterrence.
That's also true. Good point.
And they also kind of create that relationship with some of the students. They, they are a representative of the police department in most cases. And then they're on site, which, you never know what's going to happen when an event happens.
Yeah, that's true.
But someone's on site to hopefully take action. And I know in my current role and with my time at Zero Eyes, I've seen SROs do, amazing job, throughout different instances.
Yeah, the deterrent thing is a good point, actually, because, it's people essentially know, like, these people who go into a building to cause havoc, they're not just people who snapped and are idiots. They're very intelligent people, typically. They're very highly intelligent. This stuff's planned out to a point. So if there is a deterrent there, it makes kind of sense that this would be something that would deter a crime of some kind. So on LinkedIn, you posted something that was interesting that I was unaware of. The state of Iowa has changed funding. Like, I don't know if this is a new law, but there's new funding for school safety. Can you walk through that?
So I can do it to the best of my ability on kind of what's there. So the state of Iowa, kind of over the last several years, has had some different school safety initiatives. And this previous session or year, they have opened up what is an existing fund already. So the SAVE funds, they have opened that up towards some security technology that meets some specific standards. And so what that means for schools is they can purchase, security solutions that meet those standards and being reimbursed by the SAVE fund.
And so, okay, so these funds actually apply to technology, not just personnel. I don't even know if these funds do apply to personnel. I don't know where the.
So yeah, that's fun. That fund specifically does not apply to personnel. It's a fund that's kind of been in place for building renovations and things along that line, and to harden schools or create, those extra layers.
What does that mean? Harden.
So harden a school would be to, make it more difficult to break into or cause harm, things like that.
So thicker steel on doors, better locks, maybe tamper resistant glass, stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. Those things. But this kind of, I guess, last round and last session, sorry, it opened up the Save Fund to be able to purchase, softwares or services that meet, specific criteria, which, I can dig into to the best of my ability, but essentially, softwares that, are grown and built here in the United States, owned and operated in the United States, monitored in the United States as well. Because data privacy is a big deal when we start talking about technology, especially in public places.
It's a good point. We'll get into that later. I want to talk to you about that too. Yeah.
And then the other ones are, able to identify and alert local 911 and building personnel to brandish firearms. And then also
this is all in the bill?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Did you and Zero Eyes write the bill?
No.
We'll talk. So this is a great segue, because what does it do? And I know what everybody's listening. They're like, okay, I don't understand. You keep saying Zero Eyes. You work for Zero Eyes. What's the point of Zero? So maybe it would be best to just describe what does Zero Eyes do, and why is this particular solution able to fit into that funding?
Yeah. So Zero Eyes specifically it's a AI computer vision software. So what happens is Zero Eyes, the software goes onto your existing security cameras. Once it's on your cameras, it's asking the question multiple times each and every second. Is there a gun in this image? Yes or no? If it's yes, if it believes there's a gun in the image, it kicks it for us to our Zero Eyes Operations Center, which is manned 24/7, 365 by former U.S. military and law enforcement personnel.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So they then see the image, are able to kind of zoom and verify whether it is a true lethal firearm or if it's potentially not. It's a lookalike or something like that, something that needs a different response.
Right.
If it is a true lethal firearm, they press dispatch. At that point, dispatches go out simultaneously to building personnel and local 911. And they get these notifications via, their mobile phone, a computer, text message, and then via phone call.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So that phone call to 911, they get the digital as well, but the phone call to 911 is extremely important in my opinion, because it's someone that has seen the shooter in this instance.
Yeah, sure.
What they look like, what they're carrying, what kind of gun they have, where their last location was. And then they can pass that to the dispatcher. So that
instant accurate communication.
Right. So when law enforcement responds now hopefully instead of responding to the front door, they respond to the northwest, second floor of the building.
And they know exactly what they're looking for.
Yep.
They know who they're looking for to a point, at least to have a description.
Right.
Okay. So that is interesting, because there is a AI element, and then there's a human element, because sometimes AI will make mistakes.
Yes.
And so if someone I don't know what an example would be, but if someone has a big poster, they're doing like a gun safety class, and they have this giant poster of a handgun, and they just rotate it to the right, and a camera picks that up, it's going to go to someone who knows what they're doing. And then they're going to say, hold up, this is not worth responding to. This looks like it's a poster on a project board.
I can't emphasize enough how important the human in the loop is.
Sure.
If we didn't have, the human in the loop, and for Zero Eyes specifically, it is, former U.S. military and law enforcement personnel. So they're calm on the phone. They're able to dictate what they see.
Great point.
And having that human is so important because, like you said, there could be police officers with guns. There could be, a play going on. There could be all sorts of other things happening. And if there's no context to just, if it was just technology and just sending it out, you would be bombarded with information from time to time, thinking there's an emergency when there might not be. Whereas when there's a human in the loop, they can take that context, pass it on to the end users, or disregard it if it's something that, you don't need to know about at all. Maybe it's someone holding a cell phone in the shape of a gun or
Sure,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And I think there's going to be a point in the future where I'm not going to speak for you, but just of what I know of AI, I think there will be a point in the future where there won't need to be a human element because the human element will slow it down. That's a totally other issue. Maybe we can talk about that in a few years. But what I'm hearing is that the communication, like you could essentially be talking to law enforcement about a real situation before a single shot is fired.
Yes.
Right? Because right now you almost to a point have to wait until something's already happening to respond. But this will allow you to respond in real time because you already see it right there on the camera. This is going down. We need to get in place right now.
Yeah. So over 80, this is from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, but over 80% of the time there's a mass shooting, the gun is brandished from anywhere from 2 to 30 minutes before the first shot is fired.
Holy cow, 2 to 30 minutes.
Yeah. And this is something we've seen in schools over and over. You know, you saw it at the Covenant shooting, you saw it at Sandy Hook, Uvalde, over and over again. You know, these people, they break out their gun and they're either whatever they're doing, whether it's, you know, the case of Parkland where he was putting his gun together in the stairwell,
right?
Or, you know, Sandy Hook and Uvalde where they march towards the front door with it slung over their shoulder.
Right.
It's something we see over and over and over again.
That's so true. So you could very well have a police presence already ready before anything even happens. Theoretically.
Yeah. And that's the goal. That's where we want to fit in.
Yeah.
We want to provide real-time actionable intelligence. And if we can identify a shooter before the shooting starts and give the building personnel and local 911 the best information possible to make the best decision in real time, whatever that may be. You know, hopefully there's an ability to potentially lock down a school because, you know, it's not like the start of school or the end of school like we've seen sometimes.
And for those thinking like, oh, Minority Report, I don't want to be predicting crimes. That's not actually what's happening here. No. It's actually accurately communicating very quickly that a crime's already in progress.
And I'll highlight as well, ZeroWise is looking for one thing and one thing only. We're looking for brandished guns. Mm-hmm. So the gun could be strapped to the back of a dog and it would pick up the dog, pick up the gun, not the dog.
The dog doesn't care about the Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. So we're not looking for anything other than guns, which, you know, in the K through 12 space, you know, it's important for FERPA compliance and privacy and things like that.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because a lot of people, when they think about this topic, their mind goes to, you know, computers running the school and Terminator and all that. You know, this is, again, people, we always fear what we don't understand. And, you know, my privacy is not my privacy anymore. It sounds like none of that's actually true.
No, yeah, it's completely FERPA compliant. You know, we're deployed in some hospitals, so we have kind of that piece and check off there. We kind of hold the utmost responsibility to data privacy and personal identifiable information.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's working on existing camera systems anyway.
Yes.
So the camera systems are already there. They're already recording things. The AI is essentially just making, and the people reviewing it are just making faster determinations on that footage.
Yeah. And so what we've seen is, you know, school districts have made huge investments into their security cameras. Lots of businesses have. I'm sure on the way I walked in here today, there were security cameras that somebody put up.
Oh yeah, you're recorded like 20 times already, probably.
Right.
They already know you're here.
And they're doing their best to get in front of these things. But, you know, typically when you ask somebody, you know, what do you use your security cameras for?
You review it 2 days later when something happened already. That's what most people do with them.
You know, there was a fight, so we were looking to see who started it and what happened. There was vandalism. You know, who wrote whatever they wrote on the wall, you know. So how can we take something that is reactive now and make it proactive?
Sure.
And a piece of technology that can hopefully provide actionable intelligence in real time and, you know, save time. And then ultimately, if you save time, you can save lives.
And what schools are you in right now in Iowa then?
So I'm not able to share all of them.
Okay.
We have NDAs in place. If they don't want to be publicly known that they have ZeroWise, I won't share that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I can share Woodbine Community School District has it. And we're in about a dozen more districts right now.
In the state, a dozen more districts in the state.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot. Now, why wouldn't someone want people knowing they have this? Don't they consider it a deterrent? Or maybe this is sounds like there's a debate here.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a debate. I see it kind of, what we typically see is about a 50-50. And it's not always the case. Sometimes people start with no and then they move to yes, I want people to know. Because once people know, you can't go back the other way. So that's fair.
Sure, that's true.
I respect that. The way I kind of see it is, one, you can have a tactical advantage by nobody knowing.
That's a good point. If a student knew, they would maybe be rushed into making a dumb decision, whereas if they don't know, they're taking their time, and that 2 to 30 minutes is a factor.
Sure. And then on the other side, it's a deterrence.
Yeah.
So you may get a kid trying to trigger the system as, a prank or something along those lines, but it's a deterrence. And anybody that potentially was going to do harm, hopefully now knows that this is in place.
Right.
And hopefully they realize that, they're potentially going to be caught before anything ever happens. And that's a great scenario all along. I hope our technology is never used in that instance for those schools.
Yeah.
I hope that, we don't even have to detect real firearms and dispatch alerts and have that event happen. But if it were to happen, Zero Eyes is there to pass that information along.
I mean, it's really incredible, right? Because the communication issue, you can't have eyes everywhere. This is what you're trying to solve. And it is, it is possible to have a faster response, which in turn dissuades activity like this in the future. Sorry, what were you going to say there?
I was just going to say also in the event of, mass shootings, the piece that often goes unlooked is the first aid. In the event of the response, what happens is people are looking for the shooter. And while it is sad, you can't drop people off on injured victims at this point because they're still looking for the shooter. But if the sooner they can get to the shooter, the sooner, or if they know specifically where they are, potentially they can bring in first responders behind the SWAT team or whoever it may be to, use tourniquets, provide first aid.
Wow, that's interesting too. The communication aspect, really, you can see kind of a chain reaction. Like, as you're describing, if you don't have communication, you don't know where this person is, you can't bring in EMTs and just put them there, and now they're going to get injured or killed as well. You can't be doing that. So they have to wait till the situation, they have that communication before they make a decision. Are you implemented outside of just schools, or is schools happens to be a major focus? Yeah, you mentioned hospitals, I think.
Yeah. So the company was founded with schools in mind. It was kind of in the wake of the Parkland shooting in Florida, where our CEO, Mike Laif, he had a daughter in middle school at the time. She came home very shook up after a active shooter drill at school, which makes sense. That's a hard thing for kids to go through.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Man, I didn't have to go through that kind of stuff.
No,
I went through tornado drills. Yeah. And I'm from the east side of Des Moines.
Yeah.
And when we see a tornado, our reaction, this is a rule for East Siders. This is not recommended by the state government or official or safety people, but on the east side, when you see a tornado, the number one thing you do is go on your porch and look for it. I don't recommend anybody do that, but we're a little crazy. So yeah, hospitals, schools, some other,
Yeah. So, I mean, it was developed with schools in mind.
Okay.
That being said, kind of through COVID, it was about when they went to market, and they started to get responses from, commercial businesses as well that were interested in solving this problem, which, we have seen in the commercial space, the public space over and over and over again as well. A little bit different scenario, but same problem set. And then we also work with, the DOD and the government, the military as well.
Wow.
As far as, protecting some bases and some government contracts. What's
next? Like, if I'm just thinking, if I have this tool in my building, in my school, whatever, can you trigger automatic locking? Can you trigger other things? Like, is this where this is going? You're going to work with actual building systems to lock down certain areas? Like, where does this go? What's next? So
there's a lot of options, I guess, there. And what I will say is schools have made investments, like I mentioned about the security cameras. They made investments in security cameras. They potentially made investments in a mass notification system or an alerting system, or, whatever it may be, locking doors.
Sure.
So the way Zero Eyes works specifically is we integrate with those companies. We have built integrations with most of the name brand ones that are out there. And what we do is, if we have a new client that requests a new integration, we're able to kind of go to work and build that.
Wow.
So that you can have an all-encompassing solution, and it's not all of these individual things working on their own. So we do put that on through conversations on the customer at that point, the school. What do you have? What would you like it to do? Can we connect and see what would work best? But that's always possible and an opportunity with ZeroEyes.
Last thing I want to ask before I let you go. We have a lot of teachers, a lot of administrators that listen to this show. I've heard from them. If they're in, is there, and again, I don't know how you react in a panic situation, but is there something they can do? From a SEAL like yourself, you're like, hey, if I was in a building and this was going down, here is the first thing I would do. If there's one thing you can leave them with, and I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but is there any advice or? Sure.
So first, appreciate any teachers listening. My dad's a teacher. My sister-in-law's a teacher. My brother-in-law's a teacher. Lots of family and education. What I would say is, there's lots of different things taught out there, and I think they're all good because they're teaching something. So you see like run, hide, fight, or Alice training, or whatever it may be. It's great that they're teaching something. What I will say is it's always going to be situational dependent. We've seen different scenarios where, a shooting happens before school starts, or after the last bell is rung for the day, or at a football game or something like that. And that's going to be a different scenario as, we're all in class and a shooter's walking towards the front door.
Sure.
So situational awareness is most important, because that's going to be the decision of, do I lock the door and hide in the corner, or do I need to run now?
Right.
And that's hard to say without knowing the specific situation at the time and place, which is adds to the problem.
Yeah. Rob Carter, ZeroEyes, and of course Navy SEAL. And I don't know if you caught this. I don't know if this is the right, but like one time I had a Marine on the show and I was like, former Marine. He's like, there's no such thing as a former Marine. Do SEALs do the same thing? Is this a thing in the SEAL teams as well?
We don't. We don't do that. I respect my Marine brothers and sisters, but I am a former Navy SEAL.
Okay. I didn't want to say that. Number one rule on this show, at least for today, is don't tick off the Navy SEALs. So, Rob Carter of ZeroEyes. What's the website in case people want to reach out to you or the company?
Sure, absolutely. You can go to zeroeyes.com, ZeroEyes.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.